Sometimes you just gotta go Bardown.
Krull, top titty 2x4 to end the game. That was nice.
Bardown Beauties.
That's the sexy part of the game, is it not? The plays and the goals and the...
Yeah, that's what you guys like. I mean, it is great.
And now, a new episode of Bardown Beauties with Jessi Pierce and Kirsten Krull.
At Jim Beam, they know the importance of tradition, like chanting, "Let's play hockey" prior to the start of each game, or playing the State of Hockey anthem after a wild win. This season, raise one to your fan family with a bourbon that invites us all to come as friends and leave as family. Jim Beam Bourbon Whiskey, the official bourbon whiskey partner of the Minnesota Wild and XL Energy Center. Drink smart. Jim Beam Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. 40% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2021. James B. Beam Distilling Company, Incorporated, Fairmont, Kentucky.
Hello, everybody. What's up? We're back. Bardown Beauties, episode 266. I'm Jessi Pierce, writer for NHL.com. Kirsten Krull is out in Pittsburgh. She is working an NAHL showcase event, doing her thing. She was going to try to make it, and then she said, no, you know what? I don't care enough. But because we have Joe O'Donnell here to fill in the voice of your Minnesota Wild. Jojo, what's going on? You've had a pretty celebratory time away from the rink with this break, because tell the people who your football team is.
How's this?
They can't see it all, Joe. Not everybody
can't see
watches us. But if those who can see it, it's a hideous green
come on.
and white
Eagles,
cup.
baby. Go Birds.
See, it's the fans.
It's been a fun week.
Yeah, but you didn't go out to Philly, eh?
No. It's one of those things where you just got to pull the trigger, you know?
Yeah.
But with 3 kids and all they got going on and flights out there, it's just like, but then of course you get major FOMO when you don't go out for the parade, you know? So I don't think, regardless, next time I just got to, if there is another championship in Philadelphia, just pull the trigger. As soon as that parade's set, if you can make it work, just do it. You know, you only live once.
You only live once. Did you go their last go-around?
I did not, no.
Oh, okay, so you've never been to the parade.
It's a
If
bummer.
it makes you feel any better, Vikings fans haven't either.
Yeah, well, I'm aware of that. Different reasoning, though.
Hurts real bad. But let's talk a little puck. I know we are on a break from the NHL, and it's funny because I was going back in last week's episode. I've been hyped on this Four Nations. I drink the USA Hockey Kool-Aid. Like, World Juniors is my everything, and it's a best-on-best competition. I've been begging them to bring back the World Cup, which they are now every few years, which is going to be fantastic. And I was looking at the comments of last week, and people were like, nope, I'm not going to pay any mind. It's going to be soft. Guys aren't going to be competing hard. It has been anything but absolutely electric. I think the NHL, this is the best thing they've ever done, Joe.
Well, I mean, you look at the viewership, Jesse, was it 4.4 million people watch USA Canada? Like, that's the highest. I think I read it's the highest rated non-Stanley Cup final broadcast in, a
Since
hockey
2019.
broadcast. In years. So,
Yeah.
I hate to use the term, it's been a home run, but it's been a home run. Like, and I expected this, to be honest. And I'm with you. I had some people, that I know from the youth hockey scene. There's like, what do you expect? What do you think? Is it going to be, dude, just listen, pay attention when the players talk. Like, going into this thing, they all said, like, we can't wait, and it's going to be balls to the wall. And that's how they've played. And Sweden, Finland, huge rivalry, US, Canada, and then the crossover games, essentially, like, there's bad blood, even with guys that play on the same NHL team. So I think it's been awesome. Love to see it. Really excited for the rest of the action today and then Thursday's championship game. Like, I just think it's been great for the sport from a casual fan perspective. Like, the amount of people, and I'm sure you saw it on social media, that are not hockey traditionalists, whether it's other athletes, other media members that cover the NBA, the NFL. They're like, what is going on right now in this hockey game? I love it. I think it's great for the sport.
Yeah, it's been absolutely tremendous. Like I said, I was always on the side of let's go. This is going to be epic.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Joe. I think it's because we are around a lot of those guys. We know what this meant to them. We know that excitement that they had, and especially with the pending Olympics and the return to NHL players there, a lot of these guys recognize the importance of this tournament to kind of showcase themselves. But yeah, I love all the memes too, where it's like, NBA All-Star game. Nah, I don't want to play. I'm going to get hurt. Whereas USA hockey's like, I will die for my country in this non-real tournament.
You have to give credit too to the NHL and the NHLPA, right? It doesn't happen without the players wanting it, their leadership group, the NHLPA wanting it, and the NHL being willing to put it together. Now, will we see Russia at some point in the Olympics or this World Cup of hockey? Like, that's a big thing that's out there still. Throw the politics aside. I know that's hard to do, but we're talking about a sport. We're talking about some of the best athletes in the world for hockey. So I can't wait for the Olympics because Germany will be in the mix, Belarus, Latvia. Some of these teams that traditionally have had decent international success, Czechia, Slovakia, the Four Nations is cool, but it gets me excited for next year when you're going to have a full field. You'll have the NHL guys, but then you'll have the locals, right? For lack of a better term, like these guys that play in their native country, in their pro leagues, and I just think it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be so great. I know. I mean, you're without Leon Draisaitl and Ovechkin and, Kaprizov injury aside. You're missing some of the league's top players at the Four Nations. Still a fantastic sign. I also love the Tkachuk brothers. I didn't know that I loved them as much as I do, but they are literally the Bash brothers come to life. I mean, it is absolutely insane. Like, I'm all for it. I think that's what also is raising the excitement for people, right? Like you said, you don't have to be an all-in hockey fan to appreciate the show and entertainment that they put on Saturday against Canada.
Yeah, it was awesome. Those two guys are guys you want in your dressing room, right? And the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Tom Reed and I have talked about this when the Wild have played the Panthers or played the Senators with Matthew Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk, respectively. Like, they play just like Big Walt, just the same way Keith Tkachuk did. So cool to see. They set the tone. It was sort of like hey, Canada, we're here. We're ready. We're not going to be pushed around almost like we're the bully in town. I thought it was great. I'd love to see it. Again, social media went bananas. People were texting me, essentially what the hell's going on here, And I'm like, dude, this is it, man. This is, to have 3 fights and throw JT Miller in there. Yeah. Colton Parayko's a big human, and he said, screw it, here we go. So just love it. I know, the non-hockey fans, what is this? But, from a hockey perspective, nobody got hurt. Maybe it was a touch. I don't want to say stage, but like they said, we're going to do this thing, right? It wasn't based off a hit or a scrum. Those first 2 scraps were essentially premeditated, but there's nothing wrong with that, dude. That's what the game is about. I love it. I tweeted afterwards, of course, some people, I get it. I knew there'd be 1 or 2 people that didn't like the tweet, but I was like, find me an American dad more proud of his kids right now than Keith Tkachuk. Yeah. And I know, look, there's people that fight for our country, that protect our freedom. There are plenty of proud parents out there, myself included, of my boys. Yes. But, just give me a little, let's have some fun with this, all right?
Fun. Yes.
Did I need to add hockey dad? Find me an American hockey dad?
No, you'd find somebody that
Keith Tkachuk had to be, just sitting in those stands going, love it, boys. Way to go. Set the tone. This is how we're going to play this 60 minutes, and good luck, Canada. And from a USA perspective, it was awesome.
Especially there when you're in Montreal. I mean, you needed to get that crowd kind of off kilter a little bit. That's why it was so huge for USA to pull ahead, too, because the second Canada has a lead, that crowd is all in, and it was going to be an uphill battle for USA, but they played that to perfection. Yeah. I want to talk about the Minnesota Wild guys obviously participating. We'll start with Team USA. Matt Boldy, who is, for lack of a better term, buried a little bit because the depth on Team USA is so strong. So you kind of went in there expecting it. He is making his presence absolutely known. Brock Faber, a guy that I kind of expected to have himself be good on that big stage as well and kind of play a larger role. Another one. Bill Guerin's got to be pretty thrilled with the performance from the USA guys to start. And then, of course, we'll talk about the Swedish players who are doing their own thing, too.
Just stay healthy. That's all from a Minnesota Wild perspective, a fan, management, coach, fellow teammate of those guys. You just want to get out of it healthy. But I think it can, John Hines has talked about the World Championship experience for Matt Boldy last summer and just how much he felt it helped him appreciate the details of the game, that it kind of rose up his just confidence in his overall game, speaking about Boldy. And I just had Ryan Malone on my podcast just on Friday, just posted it actually yesterday afternoon. And he's a guy
Where can
that's
people find that? What's the name of the podcast?
one-on-one with Joe O'Donnell. Everybody's got a podcast, Jessi. But so I just had Bugsy Malone on. He's played for Team USA, right? Olympics. He's played for Team USA at the biggest stage, the 2010 Olympic Games, won a silver medal. And he said, like, players there will get, like, sort of that little bump from the experience of best on best and competing against the best in the world. And, you know, you're kind of like, how can NHL players get, like, more confident? How can they get a bump in their game? How can they feel better about their game? They're already the best in the world. But he said it, and coupled with what John Hines just said about the World Championship experience for Boldy, like, I'm buying this stock now. Like, you know, hopefully we get a Matt Boldy post Four Nations face-off that is just buzzing because of this experience. So him and Faber, obviously a great showing. Awesome to see, and let's see if they keep it going.
You know, before we dive into the Jules Erikssons, the Broads, and the Gusses on Team Sweden, who are also playing fantastic, are you surprised at all that the injuries haven't really been there? I mean, you saw Shea Theodore get hurt in that game one, and you were like, ugh, this is going to be a problem, especially with the level of intensity that the players are going at. I mean, granted, there's a risk every night in every single NHL game, and, you know, with the playoff push that we'll get into a little bit too post-break, but are you surprised? Like, I am a little surprised that there haven't been more. I mean, there are bumps and bruises. Matthew Tkachuk obviously taking the time to rest Cale Makar with an illness, but it really hasn't been as scary or gripping as I thought it might be.
Yeah, but I also think, like, again, at the time of this recording, not sure when you'll post it, we're only, like, halfway through, essentially, right? Like, we have 2 games today and then the championship game. All it takes is one block shot. You know, in the Wild, I've seen that, unfortunately, a ton this year, blocking shots or
Mostly
whatever.
one guy, too, that seems to have a real problem with it.
And we just, well, I mean, you know, the puck that hit Zuccarello cost him a ton of time. Faber getting hit in that game. Brodin's block. It just feels like Middleton, like, you know, there's a lot. The Wild have been plagued by block shot injuries. So, again, fingers crossed that they get through Four Nations healthy. The other thing that I didn't realize at the time of the scheduling and the timing, Jessi, is like, you know, you could be, if it's Sweden-U.S. final, which is still very much a possibility, and would be a rematch of today's game, like, you could have the Wild without all 5 players for practice this week and without their head coach. Like, we already know John Hines, Matt Boldy, and Brock Faber are not participating. Anything the Wild do, teams eligible to take the ice again tomorrow, which would be Tuesday for those listening. And then, you know, you go to Detroit Friday. So, like, does Hines, Boldy, and Faber, and maybe the Swedes as well, do they meet the team in Detroit? Like, they're not going to get a lot of rest. Yeah. I thought there'd be like a little break for some of these guys participating, but if you play in this championship game, which USA already has punched their ticket, like, you're getting almost no time off. And so how will that affect some of these teams down the stretch?
Yeah, no, and I think Hines kind of addressed it, but you're right. He didn't know what that might look like because they could have been eliminated.
Right.
I mean, you're kind of all
They
up
could be
in
done
the air.
today and coming back, and then they get a couple days. Like, I'm assuming there's something going on at TD Garden on Wednesday, because if you're going to have this last day of the round robin Monday and not play the championship game till Thursday, something's got to be going on in there Wednesday.
Yeah, that would probably make sense. Do you think that, I mean, obviously a break is good, and we stress it even at every level that we can. Like, you need to take a moment away from the game, especially with the grind of the NHL. How do you think they approach this? Because, again, the guys that are going in there are going all out. There is no rest for the weary. Do you think that that will help them post-break? Because at the end of the day, it really is only 3 games, right? 4 if you're in that championship in the span of 10 days. So it's not like it's a cumbersome amount where you're going to be absolutely burned out. Do you think it's going to be more beneficial, or do you think it's going to be a little bit more weary? What do you think as far as that approach goes? Or could it be, you know, it's just business as usual too?
I don't think it'll be business as usual. I think it's a great question you bring up. One, I haven't put a whole lot of time in, but if I'm just kind of digesting it, you know, it's like, you got to factor in the travel and the practice. I know morning skates, like, not a whole lot of energy's exerted there, but these guys left the Wild schedule, what they play, the Islanders on a Saturday night. Sunday, some point afternoon or night, they all flew out.
Yep.
Monday, they're on the ice. You know, Tuesday, they're on the ice. I think then it began Wednesday. So it's just, I don't know. I feel like there'll be that initial buzz from those guys, like feeling good, great experience, ready to keep rolling because they're dialed in. Whereas the guys that have been off for 10 days, other than a few practices, and been spending time in Cabo, maybe they're a little slow.
Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, maybe they're a little slow to get back at it. But then I wonder if some of these players participating in the Four Nations face-off will hit a wall. Maybe after the first 3 or 4 NHL games, because you look at the calendar, it's all condensed now. And you got like 26 games for the Wild, and I don't think there's more than 2 times the rest of the way where they don't play basically every other day or a back-to-back. Yeah. Right? They play the Red Wings, and they get a couple days, and they play Detroit again. After that, it's on like Donkey Kong. Yeah. And that will be interesting for me to see how teams handle this. Do you have a load management type thing like the NBA? Like, do you just manage Eriksson X minutes? Does Boldy maybe just get a day off because you're in a good spot maybe in April where you just give some of your players a breather? But we'll see how it plays out. The Wild need every point. So many teams are still in the mix. They all need points. So I expect it to be intense. I just wonder how some of these guys that have played this whole week, how they'll feel after a few games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's going to be the obvious bumps and bruises, too, especially guys like Eriksson Ek plays the way that he does, who's been phenomenal. I want to talk about those Swedish players, too. They have been great. They have been exceptional. I think this is going to buoy their stock a little bit around the National Hockey League, because we've talked about it here in Minnesota at length, right? How good Jonas Brodin is, how good Joel Eriksson Ek is, how good Philip Gustafsson is this year. And finally, now they're seeing that more on a national stage in their Swedish unis. Just another tremendous showing. Again, Bill Guerin has to be pretty proud internally as the general manager of those players.
Yeah, I think Wild fans as a whole should be extremely thrilled with how the team's been represented. It's good for Minnesota. Like the Wild brand could use a little more national spotlight. Sometimes you get lost in the shuffle out here. Again, lack of playoff success, lack of true superstars over the years outside of Kaprizov, like that. I'm not saying I'm shocked by it, but like just to get some of these players on a more national stage and playing well and contributing is huge. It's a shame they don't have any Canadians or Finns just to kind of sprinkle into those.
They should have put Fleury on that Canadian team. I'm telling you,
I
just
saw
a
that
little
today.
love. I think that would have been fantastic.
Well, listen, two things. One, what does it hurt?
Yeah.
You get the vibes, you get the leadership, you get the experience, even if he doesn't play. And then if he does play, let's be honest, he's had a pretty damn good year, and in a setting like that, a guy with his pedigree and a guy that like always seems to thrive in those big moments, who knows if he could steal you a game. Obviously, Jordan Binnington deserved probably the first start, but Canada's biggest question's in net. They probably have the weakest of the goaltenders numbers-wise on paper. So we'll see how it plays out, but it certainly would have been cool in hindsight, I think, for Fleury to at least be there for the ride. If nothing else, he just is such a good locker room guy that can't hurt your vibes at all. Like, if anything, you're getting a little boost from the future Hall of Famer being there.
Plus, could you imagine them in Montreal? Like the love that we already saw earlier this year,
the one thing, Jessi, you run into then is the fans start chanting Fleury's name, and he's like not even dressed, or he's in the press box, or he's backing up.
And then Binnington's all like, hey, what are we doing?
And we know Jordan Binnington, if there's any part of his game that should be questioned, it's usually like, how does he sometimes channel things like that or get a little squirrely back there?
Gets a little nuts. So we know USA has punched their ticket. Who do you hope they see? I understand, obviously, the rivalry, right?
Yeah.
Another USA-Canada would be great. But I love the way that Sweden plays. I think that would be a pretty good game. And Finland had USA a little bit on the ropes through 2 periods of that opening exhibition game. So either way, I think you're going to get a good contest. But who are you predicting to go to that championship game come Thursday?
All the pressure's on Canada. I mean, all the pressure. And just the fact that they know a regulation win punches their ticket. Anything else, they're kind of hoping and waiting. And Sweden is going to be motivated, because they could potentially have a chance to get in. So that first game is going to be the one that obviously tells a lot of the story. There's just so much pressure on Canada. I can't see them not getting it done. But at the same time, if they get behind, now it probably helps them to be in Boston, to be honest. Because playing in Montreal, if they were trailing, that crowd starts getting a little uneasy. You could, cut the tension with a knife type of thing. So let's just say Canada, because the talent level's there and, the will is there. let's just say Canada-U.S. rematch, because that's what I want to see. That's what everybody wants to see. I'm telling you, it'll be 5+ million eyeballs on that game on Thursday night, and be for all the marbles.
God, it'd be so good.
I know.
At TR, like the vibe at TR's
Yeah,
on
how
Saturday.
was it? Because I saw, I saw your tweets. They were playing Free Bird after the U.S. win. That's sick.
It was so good. Like everything. I mean, people got in there. So we had a pregame show. Natalie Darwitz showed up and was mistaken for Lindsay Whalen, which was hilarious to all of us. Like he was like, I'm such a big fan. And then Natalie's like, do you think I'm Lindsay Whalen?
Oh, she knew.
Like she was like, because the guy made no sense of whatever he was talking about. She's like, I don't play basketball. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway.
Well, we got a hockey game on here, boss, in a few minutes.
Yeah, it's just everything. I was like, I'm going to call you Lindsay Whalen from now on. Like, it's too funny. Too funny.
But we talked, you talked about like the atmosphere and how cool it was.
Yeah.
Like the one video of them panning across the benches while the Canadian fans were doing their Olay chant before the game, like before puck drop. Mm-hmm. If you rewatch that clip of like the slow-mo past the Team USA bench, those guys are as dialed in. I've never seen that look at Matt Boldy's face before. Like the eyes were like, it's go time. Like the Wild need that Matt Boldy. You know?
I know. It has been, and it's been absent for a month or two.
It's been sporadic, and that's kind of been Boldy's career. So talented. Bill Guerin thinks he's a 50-50 guy. He started like a 50-50 guy. Mm-hmm. He's probably more like a 35-40 guy right now when it projects out, which is still an unbelievable season.
Totally.
No argument or complaints there. But when the playoffs roll around, if the Wild can get in, you need Matt Boldy to be impactful. He's been a little quiet in previous playoff runs, maybe a little too perimeter. Can a setting like this, give him that confidence to say, hey, when the playoffs roll around for the Minnesota Wild next time, hopefully it's this year, whenever it is, that he's a guy that you can count on in a 7-game series to play the right way, to play gritty, to get in front of the net, to win all those battles. And so maybe, again, an experience like this can help some of those players and just give them the confidence knowing, hey, when it becomes April, May, and June in the NHL, like, I'm as good as anybody.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that's exactly my assessment of Bolds this year, too, is he's gotten away from some of that grittiness. Like, he was finally, tuning into that Jules Eriksson-Ek type net front presence style, and for whatever reason, he got away. And then it led to some lazy penalties because he was getting beat and just wasn't playing the game that we know he's capable of. So I think absolutely, especially if they win gold, he gets to bring some of that confidence, some of that ego with him into that locker room and, just maybe puff his chest back out a little bit and say, hey, I am here. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to talk about the Minnesota Wild, what their season looks like post-break. A lot of good things happening, but they really have to run a tight ship. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Your nostalgic SotaStick favorites are back, and they are in stock now at SotaStick.com. From the Met Center colored seats, my personal favorite tee, to the getting blown out the Metrodome door, rep the Minnesota sports timeless vibes with a SotaStick hat, hoodie, tee, whatever suits you and their nostalgic vibes. SotaStick has all the best gear in the game. Don't forget to smash Bardown Beauties at checkout for 15% off all your purchases. Again, that's at SotaStick.com. And we're back. Minnesota Wild back in action, as Joe said, very shortly post-NHL break with the Four Nations has been electric. But I want to see that transform into the Wild season. The Wild have put up a good showing, put themselves in a good spot because of a very successful first half of the year. But still, Joe, only 2 points out from a wild card spot. Colorado Avalanche just below them. So it is going to be a push to the races. I think Minnesota found their groove a little bit right before the break, kind of started to get some of those wins at home, because as we know, the at-home success has not been there, which is a big problem come March when they are home every other night. But how are you feeling post-break that the Minnesota Wild can perform? Jacob Lauko sounds like he should be getting back into action, so they'll get a little bit of forward hope. I haven't heard Hartman's appeal. Have we heard any more on that?
I haven't. Kind of forgot about it. Just assumed, 10 games is 10 games. But you're right. I thought there was an appeal process there.
Yeah.
I feel better about the team just based on those last 2 wins. Like, you don't want to go into a break, any break, all-star break, holiday break, whatever, in a funk. And after that Ottawa game, I was a little worried about how the team would respond. Sometimes in sports, when you get beat like they got beat, it's not a one-off. You know, you can try and say it's a one-off. You can try and flush it. But sometimes it's just like your confidence is just shaken, or a team exposed a weakness and then you just have a tough time getting back. Thankfully, they played better against Boston. Showed it was a one-off, even though they didn't get the result, TD Garden. And then to come home and get those wins against a bona fide playoff team and a team that was the hottest team in the NHL, arguably, and making a push for the playoffs in the Islanders, like, that was huge, especially, as you said, at home ice. So I feel way better now. I mean, you look at it, I think there's 26 games left. If they go 500, they're in the playoffs.
Right.
Period. It's not even up for debate, because they'll be in that 96, 98 point range, and that gets you in every year. I don't care what year we're talking about. So go 500. And to me, it just shows you like how much last year's poor start killed this team.
Yeah.
It's an expression I heard many years ago, and it was more about the American Hockey League, but I think it translates. Like, you can't win the Calder Cup, the AHL trophy, in October, but you can sure as hell lose it. And it's the same thing with the Stanley Cup. You can't win in October. They don't hand it out. But if you have a miserable October and November, you can pretty much, 8 times out of 10, you're done. Like, American Thanksgiving is the quote-unquote deadline. If you're not in a playoff spot, like, you have like a 20% chance to get in by the time the year's over. And that it's crazy, but the facts, the numbers back it up. So it was great for the Wild to start on time this year. It allowed them to have some stretches where injuries have hurt them, or poor play is, giving them a rough week or two. Because again, like, if you win 6 games in a month, is that a great month? No, you're like 6, 7-1, whatever, and you're going, oh, we were below 500. But you're forcing a team that's 6, 8, 10 points behind you, even if they win 8 games. Yeah. Like Vancouver or Calgary goes 8-4 in a month. They're like, well, great month. Well, what'd they make up? They only made up 6 points. So, you can have a rough month or more as long as you get off to a good start in the NHL.
Where are you feeling that the Minnesota Wild are going to fall? I know heading into this season, I felt they were a bubble team. I thought they were going to maybe be the last wild card spot in somewhere there. They've been in the top 3 for the majority of the season. But as I mentioned, Colorado is coming, right? They've got just 2 points behind them. And then things kind of start to peter off, luckily for Minnesota. But where do you think Minnesota would end up finishing the season? Let's say they go more than 500, right? Maybe they really string together a few really good wins. You're getting Hartman and Lauko back, as I'd mentioned. Krull, we don't know what that timetable is. I do not rush him at all. I will say that again. I am not rushing him back before the playoffs. I'm looking at April, but maybe end of March. How are you feeling the Minnesota Wild shake out for the second half?
I think they finish as a wild card team. I really do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think they'll probably be the top wild card. I think that would mean they probably play the Pacific Division winner, because I think Winnipeg's going to win the conference. So you're looking at Vegas, Edmonton, LA as being one of the opponents.
Teams that they haven't had too much success against.
Well, I like the chances against Edmonton a lot more with Eriksson Ek and Brodin playing, right? Like,
Very
when
true.
they played them at times this year, they haven't had them in. But you're also talking about the defending Western Conference champs. And you're talking about Vegas. You're talking about a team that won the Stanley Cup just a couple of years ago. And you're talking about LA. They've been unbelievable at home. Like, maybe the best home team in the NHL. I don't have the standings in front of me, but they're a wagon at home. So then you'd have the Wild's home ice success, or road success, against the Kings' home success. That makes for an interesting storyline. So I know, kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, they got to still punch their ticket, but I really think they'll end up as a wild card team, probably the top wild card team, and then you'll just kind of see how it sorts out. Biggest thing is, again, get 97 back, get them healthy, get him up to speed. We saw a couple years ago when he missed time in March with that injury he suffered when Logan Stanley fell on him in Winnipeg. Like, he just really wasn't himself afterwards. So if he needs time to get up to speed, that's April. Those games in April are going to be huge for him. Hopefully the Wild have things pretty much salted away where, as long as they don't have a catastrophic month, they're in. And just get Kaprizov feeling good about his game, get the goaltending situation lined up. Hopefully the special teams start to find some mojo, and then you head in the playoffs ready to roll. I know, again, that I don't like talking like that because there's so many games left, and obviously we've seen, an injury or two could derail this thing, but I really do think this Wild team is, the guys they banked on, Jessi, to have bounce-back years, Foligno, Gaudreau, in particular have had bounce back years. It was a little risky. Older players, you're saying, hey, you got to prove last year wasn't you. They've both stepped up, and it's been a big reason, in my opinion, why the Wild have been as good as they've been. They've gotten guys to step up when needed, and so far so good.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier how last year this team buried themselves in a hole early on. But otherwise, if beyond that, if you look at it, it's still a very similar season this year with the amount of injuries to key players as well. And it's the way that they've handled it so much better. Like, I think it's even beyond just the bad start, but you look at the different depth. I think the way that John Hines has really taken hold, and it's his fingerprints all over this. I think that is the difference. I love Dino. I thought Dino was great, enjoyed having him, but John Hines is just a very different coach who really tweaks things in the right manner, and I think that's what has helped them be sustainable through some of these tough losses. Because I've asked him that before too. You have these bad losses, but somehow they don't stick. They truly are one-offs, right? And sometimes the scoreboard looks worse than the actual game itself would indicate. But, a lot of credit has to go to John Hines for making sure that this team is ready to go each and every game, no matter who's in the lineup.
Absolutely. It's a great point, because I think they've had, at one point, it was 12 of their 19 regulation losses were by 3 or more goals.
Yeah.
They don't lose many one-goal games in regulation, this Wild team. And their ability to shake off a 5-1 pumping at the hands of somebody, it's been remarkable, to be honest. I think at one point they were basically undefeated after a 2-goal loss, right? In the following game.
Yeah.
7-1 or 12-1. Again, can you tell I haven't looked at my stats or notes?
You've taken a break. They're buried away. It's fine. We're all in that boat right now.
So, but again, the point is, shake off those bad losses, the blowout losses, come back the next game, respond the right way, play as a team, get back to your identity. And I do agree. I love Dean Evison. John Hines has grown on me a ton over the past year, plus that we've gotten to work with him and gotten to know him. But they're very different coaches. I'm not saying one is the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it, because look at the success Dean is having in Columbus and look at the success he's had in his career. He's one of the winningest coaches in points percentage in NHL history, as far as still being somewhat a relatively young head coach in Dean Evison, right? He's only been at this 6 years or something as an NHL head coach. So, it's, to me, it's just a different way of doing it. John Hines, I think Dean Evison is loyal. That one season, the 22-23 season, you could pencil in the Zuccarello, Kaprizov line with Hartman every night. It didn't matter.
Ad nauseum. I couldn't. The lines were never different.
Didn't have to look.
I
didn't have to watch more. And you had the Grief line, the whatever you want to call them, right? Greenway, Eriksson, Ekfelina, every night. Didn't matter. If those guys were healthy, this is who's playing with who. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but John Hines, sometimes they're in a blender by the middle of the first period, game to game. And I think it's different for the players too, right? You have to be on your toes. You got to know who you're playing with each shift, because if he doesn't think you're playing well, he's moving you or you're on the bench. Mm-hmm. And again, I think players probably like the Dean Evison thing at times, because they know, coach has my back no matter how I'm playing. He's going to keep giving me that rope, keep giving me a chance. And from John Hines, players probably just looking around who am I going out with this shift? But again, it's working. So I just seeing just a varying, a different approach, right, from Coach A to Coach B. And it's been interesting to see. And again, not saying one's right or wrong, but definitely different coaches.
Hines is a reactionary coach to me. You look at, he will assess the game in motion and say, okay, this isn't working. So he's not afraid to make those changes in the middle of a period, right? Or end the game. And that doesn't mean he's going to keep those together necessarily from game to game. He still might go back to the original, but I think that's the biggest difference, because I always kind of go back to that Dallas series where Dean felt a little outcoached because he didn't make some of those changes against DeBoer and the Stars in those instances, whereas Hines right in the middle is nope, this isn't working. We're going to have to switch this up. He's not afraid to play Kirill for 20 plus minutes, right? I think that's a big difference too, is just put him out there. He loves
97 loves it.
Yeah.
He'll be the first to tell you. He's got a good line, John Hines. I forget, because you said reactionary.
Yeah.
He says something about he doesn't want to react. He wants to, did he say respond? I don't know. He's got a good cliche in there with he feels like reacting is like the wrong
You're
term
down.
for
You're
it.
lower. Like reaction does suggest, I suppose, that you're not up to
Yeah.
par. You're behind somehow.
Like somebody
right?
slapped me in the face, I'm
Yeah.
reacting to it. And so he's kind of more like, we're not going to wait to get slapped. Like we're going to essentially make this move before we're on the defensive, I think is probably, that cliche, you have to ask him. It's a pretty
Yeah.
good one. I don't
He
even want
loves
to call it
his
a cliche.
cliches.
It might be an original one-liner from John Hines, but it's a good one. And
Kind
the
of about,
point
like,
of it
walking
is like,
cats or dog, whatever that was the other night. That was so great. How the dog will come back, but the cat, I don't know what that was. I just tuned it out.
well, you
love
recorded it and maybe you used it, and if not, you save it for later.
Yeah, exactly. Unless he talked about the lines, I didn't really probably pay attention at all.
Line
so.
heathens, hashtag.
Hashtag line heathens. Speaking of players then too, Bill Guerin, trade deadline is coming up. And I had asked him when they had announced the Kirill Kaprizov surgery, how does this affect your approach to deadline? Now, to me, Billy's a guy that's always going to be making moves, right? He's always going to be listening. He's somebody. So I don't think whether Kirill is healthy or not that Billy was going to necessarily let the deadline go by without trying to add one piece, especially with the position that the Minnesota Wild have put themselves in. I'm not saying that he's looking at making a huge splash because he can't. He still has his hands tied. We all know that. But he is going to probably look, I would imagine, at a bottom six piece if he can make it work. If he's looking at where they're at there. Am I wrong in that? What do you think Billy's thinking at this juncture? As you'd mentioned, they're still in the playoff hunt, but it's not as high up as I'm sure he'd like. And, there are some possible pieces out there. I know people hate rentals. I never mind rentals because they can be really effective. Marc-Andre Fleury was supposed to be a rental, right? Gustav Nyquist was a fantastic rental for that season. I always believe that can be a good piece. What's your approach on it? And now Billy, he could make them more than a rental if he really likes how they do too come this offseason.
Yeah. He will be active. That's just Bill Guerin's nature. It's not breaking news there. I just don't know enough about the cap situation and what they could possibly pull off. And I don't think anybody really does because we still have 3 weeks? Was it March 7th or something, a deadline? Yep. So you got a few weeks in there. You got the health status of some guys that you're probably a little up in the air on. But he will do something. I mean, that's just Bill Guerin. He's not going to just sit tight and not make any moves. Like, there will be a different player in this lineup come the middle of March. Yep. Yeah. And the other guy, too, is Yves Bouillon. He's kind of like a trade deadline piece. It's not a trade deadline acquisition. And I'm really, really excited for this kid. I don't know how his game will translate to NHL playoff hockey because that's basically when you're going to get him. But I'm really excited. I mean, like...
He put up like 30 minutes the other night.
It's
30
crazy.
plus minutes? Like, it's
crazy.
Insane.
Like, and you just watch, like, Lane Hudson in Montreal, and I had the privilege, and I mean that, of going to the Beanpot for the 2 games, like the semifinals, essentially, the 4 Boston schools when we were out there, and that was amazing to watch some of these kids, the skill of these young college players. It's crazy how good they are. Like, crazy. So, to me, I'm like, man, you get a kid like Bouillon in here, he's just going to infuse energy, infuse offense. And he skates so well. Like, I just have a hard time believing he's not going to translate. Time will tell, but, like, think about how good Faber was in that playoff series, with 2 regular season games under his belt. Like, if you add another Brock Faber-ish type, right, maybe more offensive, maybe a little less sturdy, but can eat up minutes and run a power play unit if things are going well, quickness. If he's got that compete factor, if he's got that grit factor, if he's not afraid of the moment, so to speak, which I don't think he will be, but I'm just saying, like, those are some things that obviously are going to take a lot of transition from the college ranks to the freaking Stanley Cup playoffs. But what a boost that would be for a team that already has pretty good offense from its blue line, just to be able to add to it, and then you have some tough decisions to make back there. Is it Chisholm? Is it Bogosian? Is it Merrill? Like, who's not playing if everybody's healthy? So, or if you sustain an injury, now you feel way better about it, missing a game or 2 from a Brodin or Spurgeon because you've got a young kid in there that can eat up some minutes, plus the vets that you really trust. So I'm excited about it. I don't know what they'll do with the deadline, Jesse. I know it's a long-winded answer, but either way, Billy G will do something. I think Freddie Gaudreau's played so well now, sort of in that center ice role, that gives you a little less hesitation. Like, oh, we got to find a center. Like, maybe you don't have to now. because Freddie's played well. And Husnadinov's coming a bit. Like, I'd still like to see some more offense. I'd like to see more get to the net. To me, he curls up so much coming over the blue line and just wants to spin up along the boards. Like, you got speed, bud. Take that puck to the net. Good things happen. So we'll see how his game develops, but I think you're right. There will be some type of forward acquisition for this Wild team.
But do you think for Husnadinov, this is what I've kind of assessed, I feel like maybe we set the bar very high. Like, I think maybe I had a very different vibe about him. Like, I had higher expectations than maybe was necessary. I think maybe he is just kind of that third, fourth line guy, which is okay. You do need those type of players. I just wonder if maybe my expectations were a little high. Did you get that feeling? Because I do feel when he came in, there was just kind of all of this around him. Like, he's going to be the next big centerman. And he's a small guy too, right?
Like, I don't know why were your expectations like that?
I feel like the noise around him before he actually was here. And again, having not watched him overseas, right, I didn't really know what to expect. It just makes me a little more cautious than is Yurov everything that I should be expecting as well, right?
Yeah. I think Yurov has more offense, but Husnadinov had decent numbers in the KHL, to your point. So the thing with Marat that I saw, I think that excited me last year was like the skating. You could see his quickness would allow him to compete at the NHL level. So it's like, all right, like, because if you can skate, they'll almost always find a spot for you, as long as you got some form of toolbox to go with the tools, right? Like, you can't be a complete dummy out there. But if you can skate, you're going to give yourself every chance to be in the lineup every night. So, but you gotta remember, last year was sort of a lost season by the time he got here. Like, the playoff hopes were very slim. You're playing teams like the Sharks, you're playing teams like the Ducks, and it's like, I hate to say it, some guys are going to look better than they are, and it's that adrenaline rush of, I'm in the NHL, here I am. And then it kind of, you come back to the norm a little bit. So I will say Husnadinov, like, there are games he impresses me. Again, that skating's always on display. I'd like to see a little bit more offensively from him. But if he can provide some help on the penalty kill, if he can stay consistent in the face-off circle, I think he's just a really nice bottom six center iceman for you. Another guy, Jessi, like, we talk about a trade deadline move that's not a trade move, is Liam Ogren. Like, this opportunity now with Hartman out and Ogren in, some of the injuries have given him a chance. He seems a little bit more ready than maybe he was in his first call-up this year. So hopefully the time in Iowa served him well. I know Brett McLean, the Iowa Wild head coach, was raving about how well he was playing down there. He was impacting the game with his physical play, with his shot. To me, Liam Ogren has the size of an NHLer. He's still so raw, but he's got that size where, in the playoffs, maybe he doesn't get pushed off the puck like a Husnadinov might. So maybe Liam Ogren's a guy that can give you a little something down the stretch too.
Yeah, I like Ogie's, the way he's grown much more this second recall. He had that confidence in camp. I remember a favorite line that he had mentioned. He's like, I'm here to take a spot. Like, he had no qualms about saying that. But then I think it was a big wide-eyed open experience. Like, oh, okay, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But yeah, I love where Ogie's game is. And I like Marat too. I have no problem with him. Again, I just have kind of resounded to the fact that maybe he's, not going to be this huge top six player like I think I probably pegged him in, which was right or wrong, I don't know. I just kind of in my mind thought that.
It's just every night. The NHL is every night. And you see it from every call-up. Almost every call-up. Guy comes in 3 to 5 games, you're like, oh, this kid can play. Yeah. And then game 6 through 10 through 12, it's like, now you see why he's a tweener, or now you see why he probably is been in the American League most of his career. It's just so hard every night to impact the game properly. Maybe you score in the American League and then you're brought here to play a third and fourth line role. And again, you bring that energy, you're feeling good. And then you kind of hit that wall where it's like, man, this is every other day essentially of the best in the world. And now my game's kind of tailed off. So it's just hard, especially for these young kids to just bring it consistently.
Yeah. One final question I have for you then, JoJo. Going down to Iowa, Jesper Bellstedt, what have you kind of heard? It's been a rocky season, and the thing that I love about Jesper, and I talked about this in last week's episode a little bit, he's so intelligent, and we got that when he came up and kind of cut open a vein, right? But that's almost concerning sometimes because goalies, with the way that they can be so mental, sometimes I wonder if he thinks almost too much. And then he kind of, as he'd mentioned, sometimes forgets how to play goalie because he's so inside of his head and kind of his feelings. And I love that he's working with a sports psychologist to kind of get through that. But does that raise any alarms or any little bells as to what that looks like next season and how this transition's really going to be? Because I recognize for Jesper, it was a shitty thing to have to deal with this year. Like, is there going to be 3 goalies? I thought I'm on the roster. And, unfortunately for him, fortunately for the Wild, Philip Gustafsson did bounce back huge. I mean, like you couldn't have imagined. So he's not now all of a sudden parachuting in like he had expected. So I can see where that throws everything topsy-turvy for him. But are there any little bells sounding? How are things going now for him? I know he dealt with an undisclosed injury as well, which hasn't helped. But where is your head at, or what do you know about Jesper?
We got the win Saturday night against Grand Rapids. I actually watched the game Friday. Samuel Halavai started.
Another guy who's just a little cocky, and I kind of love that swagger when he came in. I was like, who? At camp, I asked him who was the toughest scorer to go against. He's like, out here, nobody. And I was like, okay.
Like that, yeah.
Love
all right,
it.
kid.
Love it.
So I was at a game on Friday. They lost in overtime to the Griffins, and the next night, Volstead played, got the win. So that's good, right? Like, just the more confidence, the more reps he gets, the more wins, more success, the better. But look, the season has essentially been lost in a lot of ways for him. It's a bummer. It didn't work out the way the organization wanted, and probably the way Jesper and his brain played this thing out when there was talk of 3 goalies all summer long. It just didn't work. It's not blaming anybody, whatever circumstance. Like, Fleury and Gus played well. There was no room for the kid. And then it was kind of like, how's he going to deal with it? And I think, admittedly, he hasn't dealt with it great. I think he'd be the first to tell you that. I think organizationally they know he hasn't had the smoothest season. So as I'm talking about this kind of stream of consciousness, the first thing as you were bringing up this scenario to me is Freddie Gaudreau. Like, Freddie Gaudreau needed a reset so bad last year. He needed the end of the season, period. Jesper Volstead needs the end of the season. My opinion, and only my opinion. Yeah. And maybe, who knows? Maybe he gets games down the stretch for the Wild for whatever reason. Maybe he plays well. But for me, a kid like that needs the offseason. He needs to get back to training. He needs to clear his mind. He needs some time away from the rink. He's got to get his body healthy. And then he's got to come into camp so ready to try and claim a job. Yeah. The Minnesota Wild are going to sign a goaltender this summer, pending Marc-Andre Fleury retires, which we all expect him to do. They have to. Like, you need depth in the organization. They need a James Reimer type, somebody that's played 100-plus NHL games and somebody that's okay having to go to Iowa if Gus and Volstead are your 1 and 2 next year in Minnesota. There's not a lot of those guys out there. It takes something in somebody like an Alex Stalock type, right? Like a good person, a veteran guy that says, you know what, I don't mind moving my family to Des Moines and maybe getting 5 games in the NHL. Yeah. But again, that's a very limited search. If you're doing your Google search for essentially third-string goalies that are 30-plus years old and have the experience that I'm talking about, like, that's not a long list.
Which, as long as he's not overpaying, drives me insane, the way that we overpay for goalies in the offseason, right? As soon as free agency hits. So as long as Billy's not going out and doing that, I would be happy. This is, as an assistant to the assistant to the assistant to Bill, this is what I make sure to tell him all the time. If you could relay that message to him as well.
You need somebody that's willing to take like that $1 million contract, and on a 2-way probably. So less than that in the minors. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Again, it's a very small sample size of guys that fit that picture. But they ultimately need one because you need a number 1 in Iowa. If Wallsted's not there, who is it? It's not probably Halavai yet. It's not Dylan Ferguson. It's like there are no other prospects that I'm aware of that are ready.
Despite having 7 goalies at camp.
Yeah, but who's your veteran number 1? It was supposed to be Troy Grosnick. When he tears his knee in the summer, he was the perfect guy for down there. A guy that you could bring up and you're confident if he needs to back up a game in the NHL. But he leads the right way. He's got a ton of AHL experience. He's an unbelievable teammate. Like, all I've heard is Troy Grosnick, salt-of-the-earth type guy. They sign him and, he'll mentor Volstead. Everything's great, and then he tears his knee and never plays a game or a second in Iowa. And it just started a downhill spiral, really, for the organization in Iowa because of that. Like, you just need vets down there. At the AHL level, you have to have vets. So ultimately, Minnesota will sign somebody, Malcolm Subban type. Like, they need a veteran goalie. Jake Allen, I don't know what his contract's at. Like, you need a guy that has
You
NHL
can't sign
experience,
Jake Allen.
and would be okay
it.
with
You're
going
not
down.
listening to me. You can't sign Jake Allen.
Because he's under contract or because you
You
hate
just
him?
can't. Just nobody likes him here. He didn't.
Okay.
Okay. That's all we have to say. About
Scratch that from the record. I didn't say
What
it.
about Campbell, Jack Campbell? He's, maybe.
Yeah.
Huh?
No, exactly. A guy like that. Because he's not that old. He's got the experience. If he needs to play, great. If he's in the American League and he's a good person and a good leader, and wins you 25 games down there, like that's the perfect scenario. Again, there's not a ton of them out there.
So all that to be said, though, Jesper, from as far as we're concerned, is still going to be the potential wall of St. Paul, right? I mean, there's nothing that's necessarily deterring, because that is my big question. Like you said, because in indicating that, you're right. I guess if Billy goes out and gets a goalie like that, then you do have more confidence. Like, okay, they are planning to move forward with this tandem. This tandem is going to be good.
Yeah.
They have the confidence in Jesper. And I mean, there's those ongoing, and bad seasons happen. Like, it's not a detriment to his entire career by any stretch,
No.
and it happens. So
It's
I
a
think
huge,
that's the big
it's a
thing.
huge summer for him.
Yeah.
And then it's like, because we've seen Gus. Gus is going to hit a patch, it seems like, every season where for a week or two, like, he's just not playing great. And look how good Fleury's been in those spots. Like, do you have the confidence right now to play Volstead 4 games in a row or 3 out of 5 games?
Yeah.
Like, the answer to that's probably no. So in September, is that answer still no? Because then you need whoever that backup is. So it's a sneaky big storyline, depending on how everything shakes out. Obviously, there's months and months and games to be played and all that stuff. But I believe in Jesper Volstead, and that really hasn't wavered. I think ultimately he's the guy. I just don't know how long it's going to be before he shows that in St. Paul on a regular basis. I trust Richard Bachman a lot. He's the Iowa Wild goalie coach. I know him well. He had a great career at the minor league and NHL level. And he has said nothing but unbelievable things about Jesper's work ethic, his personality, his compete, his drive, his inner drive to be a great NHL goalie. So, yeah, he's had it's been a roller coaster season. He's probably in his own head. He's been banged up. Get healthy, get a reset this summer, come into camp, be ready to go. And, again, if Flower retires, that'll be a big-time storyline come September. We've got a long way to go to get there.
We got a long way to go. We got playoffs.
Let's win a Stanley Cup first.
Let's win a Stanley Cup first. I think that sounds like a good plan. I'm in. Are you in?
Who's that? Is that Madonna in the background there?
Yeah, it's Mike
Waving
Madonna.
to the crowd?
Yeah,
No
he's
big
waving.
deal?
It was his final
Twirl?
twirl out there. He's wearing his North Stars jersey. Yeah, nice little time. Good times.
Do you know he almost came back to Minnesota?
I do. I did know that. I really wanted that to happen, and then he went to Detroit because I forgot that he's from Michigan, and nobody cares. He should have come back to Minnesota.
Should have.
Should have. Like, and he probably could have gotten all the games in that he needed as well.
The
and
issue,
he didn't
though,
have a
he's
Babcock.
got Koivu. What number Koivu would have worn?
Mikko, that's a good point. I had never considered
You know?
that. Who is number 14 for Sweden, by the way, if it's not Jules? I haven't seen a 14, but
Ekholm
he's
probably.
not wearing it. Oh, okay. Because I do find that it throws me off a lot. I didn't realize
Faber's
how
wearing,
in
like,
tune
what's
to
he, in
numbers.
20 or something?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know who that is. Like,
Yeah.
and so I knew this. Final segue, and then we'll get off this. I knew Charlie McAvoy and Brock Faber had like similar kind of faces, right? And I knew they even had similar styles. I did not know how much they look alike on that ice until I've been watching them in this tournament. Like, holy cow!
He's like a McAvoy clone.
It's creepy. It's
when you
very
have coaches
creepy.
around the NHL that are not affiliated with either player or organization, and they're like, "What's the comp on Faber?" And they're like, "McAvoy." They're like clones. You're like,
the same
why
person.
does John Cooper know this? You know.
Coops. God, gotta love him. Good boy. All right. Thanks, Joe. You're the best. I appreciate you hanging out with us again. Go check out his podcast. New episode out now then?
Yeah, just posted Ryan Bugsy Malone again, one-on-one with Joe O'Donnell. Just audio. I got a face for radio. Yeah. But you can check it out on all your major podcast platforms. I'm just kind of surprised, Jessi, to be honest, we didn't do this outside today with how nice it is.
Oh, I will. I've got my American swimsuit. I'll go out and do the preview breakdown in that just to keep the
you
bit
need your
going.
head examined.
I know and I wonder why I get sick so often. Like, probably because I'm committed to I'm loyal, right? I'm loyal to my things. It's kind of fun. I like to be a little crazy. I'm excited for Four Nations to continue up. Again, shout out to our friends at Grainbelt for a great live show at Tom Reed's. We've got another one coming up March 23rd. Is that when they're in Dallas? Is that right? 23rd, 24th?
Sure.
Monday? It's a Monday. At the end of March, there's going to be tons of hockey coming up naturally again. High school hockey tournaments, college hockey tournaments, plus the Minnesota Wild and your Frost all in action. But all around, listen to Joe. He has some good stuff most of the time, minus his takes on football.